everyone, it's Dora from flippinghousesanpancakes.com, and I thought today I would talk not about our flipping business, but about our apartment and house rental business and some of the very interesting experiences we've had pertaining to some of our renters, to some of our tenants. So let's go. So we actually have several management companies that manage apartment rentals and house rentals here in Baltimore. And we've had some really interesting experiences with some of our tenants over the years. So that's kind of what I thought. I don't know, I was inspired today. I was talking with my husband and we were talking about like, oh, do you remember when that one thing happened? And I was like, oh my gosh, I should tell you guys about some of the weird stories that have happened with some of these tenants. I wrote a whole list so I don't forget any, and I'm not going to tell you, like, there's some really basic ones. Of course, we've had hoarders in apartments where we could barely get in through the door. We've had tenants, we have some elderly tenants who have fallen down, and some relative has called us 3 days later and said we can't find them, and we've fortunately found everybody in time to get them to a hospital. We had an incident not too long ago where, thank God she was okay, but she had been stuck in her room, in her house, or her apartment for 3 days, like laying on the floor. It was a little traumatic for the people who found her as well, but she's okay, so that's good. That's good. But we've had like that kind of occurrence, and there's always somebody crazy. This person's smoking, this person's doing drugs, this person doesn't behave themselves. There's always something. This one makes too much noise. We have two ladies who like to fight all the time. They're little old ladies. They're just constantly like, this one did this, that one did that, and they're always calling the management company to complain about what the other one did. But then there's like some that's just like a little more. For example, this one's a small one. We got code enforcement letter for somebody who was living in an individual house, and the people who are living in the individual houses are responsible for keeping the yard maintained, and we got a letter saying that the yard had not been cut. And when we called her to discuss why she wasn't making sure that the yard was cut, she said, I don't know how to do it. Can you bring somebody? Because I think it's going to take me a really long time to cut it with the scissors that I have. And it was just like, what? We didn't cut it with the scissors. That's like, that's nonsense. I don't know what that means. That was like a very simple, like these are the really small ones. I'll start with those small ones. I'll get to the crazy ones afterward. We had somebody who called me. She was so mad. You don't understand how mad she was. She had been ignoring all of her water bills. Now we pay the water bills we make sure the water bills on the properties are paid because nobody wants a property to go into foreclosure in the state, in the city, because they didn't pay the water bill. So, but then the tenant is supposed to then reimburse for that water bill. I'm gonna wait, there's a motorcycle driving past. Sorry, there was this motorcycle that went past and I couldn't even get the words out right after that. It was just I got a little thrown off there. Okay, so the tenant in this case was supposed to reimburse us the fee of the water bill every month, and she hadn't paid us for that in a year specifically, but she paid her rent, and the rent in her lease, the water bill was collected as rent, so every time she paid her rent, it went toward the water bill and the rent. And so she got like very behind on her payments because she was ignoring the water bill part. It's a long, complicated story. Then when we called her and we said, we have a water bill and you haven't been paying it. That's what's going on. That's why you're so behind on your rent. She got so mad and she was like, why should I have to pay my water bill? You call the owner and you tell the owner that they have to pay my water bill. There's no reason I should have. She was going on and on. I'm telling you, 5 minutes of like, the owner should be paying my water bill. Why should that be my responsibility? It was like, well, you're the one using the water, and it says in your lease that you're responsible for the water. And she's like, no, why should I have to pay the water bill? Call the owner when I want them to come down and talk to me because I shouldn't have to pay my water bill. She's not there anymore. We'll just put it that way. She's not in that unit anymore. But yeah, really, it was her responsibility to pay the water bill. Anyhow, those are the really mild ones. So let me tell you some of the less mild ones. Okay. I'm just going to start at the top of my list because I think that's just the simplest way to do it. We had, and this is the one that triggered the thought that I should do this video. We had a renter, a tenant, and it was an older lady, and she had been living in the unit for a long time, and she'd gotten to the point where she had to move out and move to like an assisted living. So that was fine. She had been a nice tenant, and we filled out all the papers. She was moving, and her daughter wrote to us and said, okay, we want the security deposit back plus the interest. So we sent them a thing, and that's what we do. We keep it a security deposit. It's a certain percentage, and we pay it every year. Like once a year, you get an interest on that initial security deposit. And she wrote this letter back to us and was like, this is not the right number. This is crazy. What are you doing? This is the correct number. And she wrote a huge number, and I'm talking over $100,000. Okay, over $100,000 for the security deposit on like a $900 unit, like $900 a month rent. Like, that's not how it goes. It's once a year. And she goes, no, it's compounded interest, and it's compounded daily, and that's how you're supposed to do it. Now, just to clarify, if I put $100 and I compound it daily for a year, my $100 is now $3,778, and we're talking 14 years. So this is like, and it grows exponentially because you're compounding every year. If you don't know what compound interest is, you should look that up. It just means I add that interest in to my initial, like she put that $100, and the next day she gets, let's say, 1% on it, and that 1% is now included in the interest, like for the next time. So then day 2, it's interest on $101, and so it piles up very rapidly. And she said, there's this crazy number. And I'm like, I'm telling you, I'm sorry to explain to you, but we do not owe that kind of money. And she started yelling. She's like, I have a PhD in math. I teach in one of the universities here. And I know exactly what I'm talking about. You guys don't know what you're doing. This is how much interest you owe my mother. I think I was on the phone for like a half an hour trying to explain that we do not do daily compounded interest on, like, I wish we did. When I say that, I mean, I wish somebody did so I could rent from them, because I would love to make that kind of money on a security deposit. Well over $100,000 that she wanted back for her mom's security deposit of like $500 from 15 years ago. Was totally insane. So that was really fun. Talking with this like crazy, I'm a math professor. Like, well, math professor, you should know that we don't compound interest. And if we don't compound interest, this is how much you're supposed to be getting. Like, no matter what I did, she would not stop. I think we ended up having to send something from maybe a lawyer. I don't even remember how we got that finally cleared up, but it was pretty bad. We had to pull up her lease. We had to show all kinds of stuff to, like, she was determined that we owed that kind of money to her mom. So that was like, ooh, a little crazy. That wasn't the tenant. That was the tenant's daughter. So that was one. We had another tenant, and we had been getting complaints from the person below that there was some water. They were starting to see some water damage. We didn't know why. And then that tenant above them had not been paying rent, and they ended up getting evicted. And when we went into the unit, we figured out why there was water in the unit below. Well, the tenant had decided that they wanted a washer and dryer in their unit. Now, this was a building that had like one per building. It's kind of garden style, one washer and dryer per building. Nobody had their own private washer and dryer, just to clarify. And this tenant had never contacted us and said, hey, I desperately need a washer and dryer in my unit. No, they took the plumbing from their bathroom, opened it up, and rerouted, like added plumbing that ran from the bathroom to their closet, and then installed a washer and dryer on their own in the closet in the unit. And of course, they did all the plumbing themselves. There was no plumber involved in the plumbing. We had to pay to repair all the plumbing, repair all the water damage. Why would you just installed your own washer and dryer? Literally, they ran their own plumbing, and just to add a little bit of something when they left, they also stole the chandelier from the dining room. They removed it from the. It's installed. It's not like a lamp. They removed it and just left the wires. So that was a fun tenant. It was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that they just did that. All right, I've got two more. For now. We did have a tenant. We got a call saying that there were police at the building, and my husband went there and found out that like they had blocked off a whole apartment because one of our tenants had stabbed his girlfriend in the bedroom of the unit. Stabbed her. I believe she actually survived. He was arrested. We couldn't go into the unit for several days because the police had blocked it off for crime scene investigations. And then I had to send our crew in to clean all the blood stains off of just everything. And it was a big mess. We ended up evicting him because we couldn't, and that took like 3 months. So the unit stayed empty for like 3 months while we went through the eviction process, while he was in jail and she was recovering in the hospital. I was like, oh good, I'm so glad we had a stabbing. Like, really? So that was, okay. And one more story, and this is a fun one. We had a tenant who attempted to take us to court because they wouldn't let us into the unit to fix anything. So the AC wasn't working. They wouldn't let us come in. There was a leak in a pipe. They wouldn't let us come in. It didn't matter what we did. They wouldn't let us come in to fix anything. And that is not, according to lease, you're required to allow repairs and things like that. Because it just damages the whole apartment, and because we become liable if something happens to you because you didn't let us fix something. So we started an eviction process, and when we started that eviction process, they got mad, and they decided they attempted to sue us, took us to court, because they had been living in that building for over 20 years, and they decided that because they had been living there so long, technically, they own it. Obviously, it did get that court case did get thrown out because it turns out they didn't own the property. The owner of the property owned the property. They just thought, we've been paying rent for 20 years, so we own it. Like, you can't just, like, they took the management company to court for trying to kick them out of their apartment because they were determined that they owned the building because they had lived there for so long. I don't even know what else to say about that. It was really something like, who took this case? Really? You thought that this was a good case to take? Okay. Anyhow, so those were a few of our crazy tenants that we've had. I'm sure there's like tons more stories that I just didn't think of today. Those are the ones that just, like, off the top of my head, I thought of, like, oh yeah, I remember that one. Oh, I remember that one. Of some of the interesting experiences you have when you do apartment and house rentals. I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, go ahead and hit like, subscribe to my channel, hit the bell for notifications so you find out every time I upload a new video. And I don't really have rental stories on my website, but I do have lots of good, fun kitchen and house design tips and lots of cooking and things like that. So go ahead and check out my website, flippinghouseandpancakes.com.